Okay, sorry about that. All right, we're back on. So this will be part 2 in the video about planting. So let's get started, shall we? This little guy is a tropical houseplant. Is really typical to find at like any retail store. I actually cannot remember the name of it. I'll post it in the comments below when I remember, or I'll tell you if I remember while I'm doing this. Anyway, so I want to transplant this up. Now, when you're transplanting your plants and you want to put them in a new pot, you definitely want them to go in only one pot size bigger. See how that is not much bigger. Now, you might see a pot that doesn't seem very big. It's like, it doesn't seem that big, but it's so much bigger than this. That is not a good idea. So you want it to just barely fit right inside there. See, there's just a little bit of room on all sides and over the top. You could go slightly bigger than this if you really needed to, but I wouldn't recommend any bigger than 6 inches. This is, I think, a 4.5 or something like that. No, it is a 5 inch. So you could go up to a 6 inch, and that would be okay, but I wouldn't recommend going any higher than that, because what happens is our root systems just go into too much shock, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to go into shock, because then that's when you experience the failures, and then you get discouraged about having houseplants, right? This particular pot has a built-in drainage, a built-in drip pan, so that when I water this plant, it'll be caught. But there are other options. You can do just a typical nursery pot that looks like this. I save these guys for when I buy other plants, and I save them so that when I want to pot up to the next size, I have them. So that's why I have all these plastic pots. The key to these plastic pots are, one, you definitely need to sterilize them. You never know what kind of fungus or disease might be growing in the soil of the last plant that these pots had in them, or what might be growing on them from just being in storage. So hot soapy water, make sure they're dried off. If you're really concerned, you can wipe them down with a diluted bleach or hydrogen peroxide, but usually hot soapy water is just fine. The other thing is, you see the big drainage holes. So you definitely want to have a drip tray, which is kind of hard to see. Oh, here we go. This one might be a little big for this guy. See how he's way up here? You really only need it to be here. So if I were to use this pot, I could do a couple of things. One, I could go to the store and buy another 29-cent liner or drip tray. I could cut it down, or I could just not care and just be careful that definitely don't want to fill this up with, you don't want to keep watering this until this is full. But because I don't have a decorative pot available for this size, I will be potting it in this pot because it's just a little cuter than an actual decorative pot. What I mean by a decorative pot is, what this plant was in was this nice ceramic pot that has a plastic liner inside, and it's surrounded by moss, and then I just set this right inside here, so that it looks really nice in my living room. This is just a pot that I picked up for $8 at IKEA. The liner was like 39 cents. This is actually moss that I got at the Dollar Tree, guys. It's not a big deal. This moss will turn, brown and after maybe like 2 years, and you want to replace it, and it's expensive to do it through the nursery, so don't try to go overboard. You could get real fancy with plants, obviously, but you don't have to. So all in all, for $10, this plant probably cost me $3. So maybe $10, $12. I had this really nice setup for my entry table. Well, I'm going to have to get a new plant to place in that pot to put on my entry table, and that table has very low light. So that's pretty typical also, that I put my babies in that pot on my entry table, and then when it gets time to transplant it, I just get a new plant. Hey, good excuse to buy a new plant for me. Anyway, so I've got my pot, it's clean, it's sterilized, and I've got my potting soil, which you can just buy any houseplant potting soil. It's up to you. I mix my own, and I can put a recipe on my website, but I'm not going to talk about that here. It's kind of in depth, and I'd like to, be a little bit more specific for you. But it definitely has perlite. You can see all the little white bits in it. That's perlite. It allows the soil to have some air in it without creating air pockets. Because it's really important that we don't have air pockets. When we have air pockets, what happens is the root goes down into the soil and there's an air pocket. And then no water can get into the air pocket. It goes whoosh around the air pocket, and no water gets into this part of the root, which will dry up and shrivel and die. And then the plant has less and less root. So, I'll talk about that in just a second too, but at the same time, the roots do need some air around them, which sounds like it's finicky. It's really not that big of a deal. If you have the right kind of soil, and most for houseplants, it's really easy. Just buy a bag of houseplant soil and you're good. So here I am with my plant. I'm going to pull off this container. You could see that she's pretty root bound. She's ready to get turned. She's ready to be put into a pot. But she's not like overly root bound. If the roots were like circling and circling on the bottom, you would know that I was like way overdue. So I just made a hole big enough for that root ball to go in. And what you want to make sure is that the crown of your plant, which is the top part of the plant where the plant stem touches the soil, that's the crown. And you don't want to bury your crown. So whatever depth you put it into your pot, make sure that your soil line is still at the same level as it was in the previous pot. So, and then you want to kind of pack it down, try to get those air bubbles out, right? And now I've got my new pot. It's all ready to go. And I like to go ahead and fertilize these guys. And because it's fall and the growing season is over, I don't want to fertilize it with anything that's going to like really want to like grow super fast, like a typical store-bought fertilizer. So I brew tea stems because just a couple weeks ago I harvested all of my chamomile and I picked off all of the flowers for my own tea, but then I have all these stems and leaves that smell so delicious and they have so much nutrition in them. So I go ahead and boil them and make tea for my plants. So that's what I'm going to water this guy with. And I'm going to water her a little bit more than I ever typically would. And the reason for that is I want the water to get all down inside of her roots and push out all of those air bubbles so that there's no way that she's going to have air bubbles trapped around her roots. And I'm going to spin the pot around a little bit and just keep doing that and watering it. I do wait for the water to like sink down into the soil, and because I still don't want to overwater her too much. And that's probably all I'm going to do. She's good and watered now. And you did probably notice that I put the drip tray underneath her, and it's because I watered her so much that I know that even the drip tray that's included on that pot is going to overflow. And when it does, I could just get rid of the excess water. But that's it. Super simple, right guys? The number one tip that I want to give you is basically you're just going to stick your finger knuckle deep. And if it comes out with soil attached, see my finger's all soil attached, your plant doesn't need water. If it comes out and there's no soil on your finger, or it's just like dry, just barely touching, and you're not like a dirty finger, then you should water. And less is more, always, until you really know your plant. That's it, guys. Happy planting!